Look at that outstanding display case in the background there, man.
Isn't that awesome?
That's
Yeah.
nice, dude.
Yeah, a
And you
lot of those
made
I've
that.
had. Shit, when I was unpacking packaging for the first time, my kids were like, "Well, how old is this?" And I go, "Dude, I bought that like that's probably shit 30 some years ago, and I'd
Wow.
never opened them up." They're like a lot of James Bond 12-inch figures back in the day when they came out with them, and they started getting real articulate. I was like, "Oh, I gotta have those," so I got those, and then there's an old Indiana Jones there, the 12-inch doll from our childhood. You may have had. I had it, and then I had to go back and rebuy it on eBay. But I love that old shit. I got boxes and boxes full of like the old toys we had when we were kids.
All I hear you saying is you like 12 inches. That's all I'm hearing.
Hmm.
I'm sorry.
You
That's
would think, yeah. Well,
right.
when I was unpacking them, my wife was making fun of me. She's laughing. Goes, "Look at him playing with his toys."
That's as wrong as two. Never mind. I won't say that.
Right?
Yeah, that's just wrong, by God. So, we got kind of a cool show this evening. If you are a Stephen King fan, you may or may not like this show this evening, but either way, we're going to talk a little Stephen King stuff, man. What you got planned for us?
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of relevant right now, especially because he's got a new book that just came out, I think last week, called Holly, and it's kind of a continuation or a spinoff of uh, his Bill Hodges novels, which were, I think they came out, Jesus, probably 6, 7 years ago, and
Hmm.
it was like a trilogy, and it was actually turned into a TV show called Mr. Mercedes. I don't. Did you see that? I think it's on
No,
Hulu.
no, I didn't know
Okay.
anything
It
about
real
that.
good, man. I mean, and the characters were great. It's like it was a little bit of supernatural, a little bit of detective. It was kind of like a detective agency, and they tinkered with that supernatural side, but it wasn't
Hmm.
too, like a lot of people relate Stephen King. At least when we were growing up, he was kind of off the wall supernatural. He's kind of
Oh
tamed it
yeah.
down a bit, but he leaves that element in there. And anyhow, just a good story. But he just came out with a continuation of that with just the second main character named Holly. So, in light of that, I was thinking to myself, well, this would be a good time to cover that because that's got that nostalgic edge to it that we grew up with. I know that I started reading him at an early age, and I knew that throughout my childhood, probably starting with Carrie,
Yeah.
he was pretty prominent, right? Especially in the '80s. He there was a Stephen King movie. It seemed like once, twice a year for sure.
Yeah, no
So I thought
doubt.
that'd be a good topic to discuss right now, especially being that it's current
It is
and still
definitely
nostalgic.
current. You know what, Stephen King. Clearly, we both grew up on Stephen King movies, books, whatever the case may be. And I was, I'm not, I'm a fan for sure, but I haven't. There's no way I've read all of his books. I'm not
Hmm.
that big of a fan. I have read a lot, and I've seen a lot of his movies, but yeah, he's kooky, man. But he's a Maina, so what do you expect, you know?
Yeah, that's the weird thing, man. Is he's like a media darling today, and we'll get into that more later on. But when I was growing up, everybody thought, well, there must be something wrong with this guy because the stuff that he wrote about back then, especially in a more conservative America, was kind of, you know, in a lot of people's eyes, groundbreaking. I mean, it really wasn't, but in terms of horror and I guess popular horror fiction, he was the guy. He was the guy that everybody talked about, and the movies were, for some reason, people really, you know, I've read quite a few of his books, and they weren't all great, but it didn't seem to stop them from making movies
Right.
um, of those books, and it really didn't seem to matter. A lot of them were short stories that they were pretty unremarkable. Um, yeah, he just, for whatever reason, people thought he was a weirdo back then, and today they seem to, he's grown on them. The same people that probably would have been critics at that point in time. But um, like there was, I think what was the? Can you remember the one? And Carrie, of course, that was the one that kind of. I think he wrote that, and then that they made a movie of it, and that kind of put him on the scene, right?
I don't remember which one came out first, whether it was Carrie or Salem's Lot. They were both
Oh
around the
yeah,
same time frame.
right.
So, but yeah, if Carrie came out first, then it was definitely Carrie. If it was Salem's Lot, then Salem's Lot put them on the map. But yeah, I can't remember which ones. Shit, man, I don't remember my name half the damn time.
Right. That well, we're getting old. You
See,
know,
I
this is
forgot.
why we do a nostalgic podcast.
I even forgot to start the podcast on time tonight.
Right. We're way late. Well, I'll tell you this. Yeah, you're right. Salem's Lot. I think that came along a little bit later, and I remember that. I think that was a television series, right? It was like a two-parter,
It's
and it
a
had
little
David
mini
Soul.
series.
Yeah, it had David Soul, and I was a
Yeah.
big David Soul fan because he was in Starsky and Hutch. Remember? And that
Yes.
was a dude. I actually do have. Speaking of action figures, the old Migos with Starsky and Hutch. I had them as kids, and then I rebought them in the packages. So I actually have those in the packages because I used to play with those damn things. That was what we played with when we were kids. We're freaking adult detectives dolls, right? And they were little 8-inch dolls. But he was in that, and he went on to make that movie. He was actually pretty good in it. And I watched that. Geez, I think I watched it last Halloween.
I
Um,
I know we're jumping. I'm gonna jump a little bit forward here, but that I was not a big fan of the movie
mhm.
or the miniseries or whatever you want to call it, and
Yeah, I think it was a two-parter, if I believe.
and I think primarily because I read the book first.
Okay, so you read
So
that book.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, I never did.
and I really enjoyed the book, and they tried to stay close, but how close can you really stay to the book with a made-for-TV miniseries? You know,
Especially back then, right? When I
yeah,
think that there were so many obstacles you'd have to avoid. Even if you were put in a theater, you people would want to avoid it. I don't know what the book was like, but King had his gore. They
yeah.
really couldn't put that in there. They did get some. I think it was what it was. It was David Soul, and then there was James Mason, right? Wasn't he the
I don't know that name.
James Mason?
Yeah.
Wow, Jesus.
Wait a minute. Is he her? He's not.
Yeah, he's an old English actor from the day. A lot of old classics.
I guarantee I'd know the face. I just
Yeah.
don't recognize the name. But and then yeah, I guess it had some pretty decent big name B list actors
Mhm.
for the time. And
Yeah,
it
and they
wasn't,
all went
it
on to
wasn't
star in Porky's afterwards, probably, right?
yeah, right. It wasn't bad, I again, my
Well,
mind went off
for the
in a different
time,
direction.
yeah, for the time, it wasn't bad at all because that was a made-for-TV show, and we had a lot of people don't know that we had what 3 channels. I don't even know if we had HBO at that current
Wait,
time. Maybe we did
4
4.
because you
Yeah,
had your
so if you
UHF
got a
and
made-for-TV movie like that was everybody lined up for that, so you would
yeah.
watch it and it would go over real well. I mean, I was too young probably to know then, but who knows how good To me, anything nostalgic holds up today, but I don't know at the time. I'm
Right.
sure it had to be. I remember the 3D movies, man. Remember when they'd announce the 3D movies and you go out and get your glasses at the gas station and everyone would
Yeah.
sit in front of the TV set and tune their TV. Remember you used to have to tune your
Yeah.
TVs.
And this
Like
shit never
okay, now tune
worked,
them a little to
man.
the left and now, you remember
It's,
that?
this shit never worked.
It never worked. And then even
Never.
if it did work, you would be you'd sit there and there would be like what, maybe 2, 3? Because what they did, right, was they took old shows, and then they would try to make them into 3D. If I'm correct, I
Yeah.
can't remember now. It's been so long, but I can remember like being out my bike and all of the kids in the neighborhood going, "Did you get your glasses? Did you get your glasses? Yeah, I got them. Well, the show's coming on, man!" And they're like, "We better get in," and we'd all go in, and it was like that appointment television.
Right.
And then I just remember that my dad, they'd give you the instructions. You'd have to tune the contrast or whatever the hell it was,
Tune in
right?
Tokyo.
Yep, he'd be up there like, okay, and he'd tell you how to do it. Now this screen should look like this, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
good
You had to get
times,
in there
man.
and you had to adjust the colors on it. Is what it was.
Right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
But
remember, whenever you would see like they would show commercials for it or whatever, and you would see people in the audience with their 3D glasses, and they'd show something, and they would like fucking completely overreact, like, oh,
Yeah.
and then you're
Yep.
like, oh, this is gonna be great, and you put them on, you're like, this fucking sucks.
Do you remember Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks? When Tom
Yeah,
Hanks
oh
was
yeah.
funny. Yeah, so there was that, and remember at the end, and they're fighting in front of the movie screen. Him and the bad guy that was after his girl,
Right.
and the girl. It was a girl and a guy on a date sitting in the front row, and the guy goes, "Man, this is a great 3D movie," because they had their glasses on, and
Right.
she goes, "I've seen better." And all of a sudden, he goes to throw the punch, and he misses. Tom Hanks ducks or moves out of the way, and he hits the girl right in the nose, and her hair goes back. She says, "Ooh, damn, that is pretty good." Every time I
So
think of 3D,
cheesy.
I think of that. I love that movie, but that's probably my favorite Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah, there were so many of those types of movies in the 80s, and they were great, They're
Yeah,
cheesy as hell. Don't get me wrong, but they were, I don't know, almost like cult classics, not quite, but something about them, and I guess maybe because we were coming of age, if you will, back in those days, they were just, I don't know, they were fun and they were cool.
yeah,
He's like, man, this is what adulthood is going to be like. I'm going to go
right,
pick up
yeah.
some chick and get in a fight with a dude in a movie theater.
Well, so we'll go back to King here. We're getting away
Wow.
from him a bit, but he. I'm trying to think. I think the first, because I remember Carrie being on cable. That was a big thing, but I think the first one that I seen, and I seen it so many times because it was like on that HBO loop, was The Shining, and that was a
Oh,
book
yeah.
that was supposed to be a huge. I think that kind of put him on the map after Carrie. I think it may have been older. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
after he caught on, I think people went back, and then Stanley Kubrick made that
Mhm.
into a movie which was nothing like the book. And I
Yeah.
actually went back years later, I think back in the 90s, and read that book. I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. And I did. And yeah, it's nothing like it. It's got kind of the same setting, but for the most part, and but back then, if you think about it, that's still a great movie.
Mhm.
Still holds up. It's got the classic Nicholson lines, but it's not the same thing. So, at worst,
Yeah.
we got two good stories out of it, kind of based in the same kind
I,
of atmosphere.
I tell you what I like about King. All of his stories are connected somehow.
Yeah,
Some
in their
way.
own way.
Yeah, you got to pay attention. Sometimes it's pretty blatantly obvious, and then other times it's very subtle.
Yeah, and that reminds me. So, did you ever read the Dark Tower novels at all? The
So
Gunslinger.
that I attempted to. I couldn't get into them for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Maybe now that I'm older, I might. But yeah, I couldn't get into them when I was younger.
Yeah, I love those. I read those. I think I started that in high school. I think I was a little bit late to the game,
Well,
and I
everybody
started
was
those.
was raving about them, and I just for
Mhm.
whatever reason I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, well, they got it was addictive almost. You got really, and that's one of the things, man. That King, I think, I read a lot. I almost always am reading a book, or I have an audio book in or something. Um, and I think one thing he's done better than anybody, at least that I've ever read, is his character development is spot on. And he's the only guy that I can think of that when I would close a book, uh, he had described them. You felt like you knew them people. So when
Right.
you close the book, the story's over, that everything's resolved or not resolved. But the sad part was saying goodbye to the characters, which you felt like you knew. And to this day, dude, I think that is, if you were to ask me, why did he become so big? I think it was that he had that ability to just develop those characters that when you were done, you felt
Mhm.
like you knew them. And I think I still, like I said, I don't know any author that I've read that can do that.
Yeah, he's a master storyteller for sure. Regardless of what you think about him on a personal level, masterful at telling a story.
Yeah.
And
Um, and we'll get into that personal level later because it's kind of it's definitely a change, but as far as I can tell, but yeah, that was his gift. And there was a lot of the books I'd read, the endings they weren't always satisfying, right? I mean,
Right. I
the
think I
beginnings
like
are
that.
awesome.
I think I like that the most about it because you think you get it figured out. And it just goes to show you that, hey, man, life isn't always about happy endings.
Hmm. Well, I think so often with him, though, to me, he had this great idea, but he didn't know how to end it.
Mm.
And they start out on this roller coaster ride, and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And then you get about three quarters in, you're like, oh, I don't know if he, like Needful Things was a great book, right? And
Oh, yeah.
that starts out just so great, but it just, in my opinion, you want more from that because again,
Hmm.
he develops these characters and he develops his town. He's a world builder, and that's what he does so well. But then it's like you come to the prize, and you don't. It's just like you don't get it,
I
and
just
and
picture
you're
him
okay
saying,
with that. You almost wish he just would forget the ending and keep you with the characters.
right, it's almost like him like, and I'm spent, blew his freaking wad
He's like,
throughout, and
boy, it sounded really good in my head, but I don't know how to end it.
well,
Which
I can
it's
relate to
okay
that.
because I think the first three quarters of all of his books were worth that ride.
Hmm.
Um, there were
Needful
even some of the
things.
gunslingers. I think there was like what, six or seven of them, and they all kind of tie together, like you were saying earlier. There's so many other books like Hearts in Atlantis, which ties into all of those, and when you get those little Easter eggs, because I think that's what he's king at, to
Hmm.
use
I
his
see
last
what you
name.
did
He's got those little
there.
Easter eggs laced throughout it, and they're great. But I think that's what he does so well. He develops those worlds. He world builds, and then he um, sometimes it doesn't matter if he doesn't know how to end them, because I'm telling you, a lot of the time, I don't think that. I think he's like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that at some point. But let's cut right to the chase. What's your favorite book by King?
Um, Man, I've been
It's a
reading.
tough
So
one.
it is a tough one because I started reading him, and I'll cover that a little bit. Um, I was always a reader as a kid, but when I read a lot of the Great Brain novels or the Super Fudge or whatever those books were, and then I got into my junior high years, and I moved away from it, and reading was stupid, and anybody that read was stupid. And then later on in my teen years, I remember my mom had a Stephen King book, and I go, what is that? I go, I'd like to maybe get back into reading again. So she gave it to me, and it was called Misery. So I read
Mm.
the book, and then later on the movie came out. But it was really neat because I'm not sure at that point if I had done that, read a book and then got to go see the movie and see if they had made it, just like that or close to it.
Mhm.
And that book was incredible. So if I were to say that, probably for many different reasons was one of my favorites because it brought me back to the world of reading. And then at the same time, I thought the movie was pretty close to the novel, and the novel was, that's one of the few King books I just think is pretty solid all around. It's not like Grapes
It's
of
not
Wrath or
your
anything like that, but it's gonna get it does what I like, and that's
right.
entertain.
It's not your stereotypical horror story,
Yeah.
and but I think the reason why it's so scary is that you could imagine somebody actually flipping their lid and doing that for real.
Oh yeah. Well, probably is happening right now, right?
I guarantee it. Well,
Yeah.
no, they got the writer's strike going on, so ain't nobody working. Nobody gives a shit.
Well, those guys can't write anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? Maybe they can. Maybe Stephen King will become a scab and cross the line if he's still with us.
He might pull off a scab or two, but
Yeah,
I
that's
tell you
probably
what.
it. I loved Misery, and then I got into the Gunslinger shortly after. Like I said, I was late to the game on that. I think he had released that quite a few years earlier, and I read that. I think it was like 100 pages long, but it was a good intro.
Mm,
And I was like, oh my god, I really liked it. I liked westerns, and the Gunslinger's a cowboy. I got the Pale Rider. Remember Clint Eastwood.
Oh,
I
do
got the
I?
Pale Rider right back there in the top shelf there, and so I'm a big Western guy, and I just was hooked on that immediately. I think he had 2 books at the time, and I read them, just ate them up. So I loved those. One of my favorites, I think he developed a character because that's what I like. I like the journey and the getting to know the people, and it was the Bag of Bones, which I think came
Mm,
out early to mid '90s, and I loved that book. They made the movie with another James Bond guy, Pierce Brosnan.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah. So that
Wow.
I love that one. There's a lot of great ones. I never read the Christines, which were popular, Pet Cemeteries, which were really popular. I'm sure they were great. I love the movie.
Mm.
I love Christine. I almost watch that every year. Carpenter, John Carpenter directed that and did such a great job. And um, just a quick, simple movie, the way they should be. And yeah, that books, movies. I think The Shining, maybe. I know that's pretty typical people to say The Shining, but Misery is still great. The book, the movie.
Mm. I'll tell you, my favorite book. I went with Needful Things.
Oh, that's great one. Yeah, yep,
It spoke to me at the time when I was a kid and I read it. It spoke to me for whatever reason, and I was just hooked on it. And then I was very disappointed when the movie came out. But and to be fair, it stuck fairly close to the book. It just
yeah.
again, it didn't really do it for me. But my least favorite movie is Gerald's Game.
Oh shit, that just came out a few years back, right?
Yeah, it's probably been out 5-10 years now, I guess.
The movie?
I think so. Yeah.
I thought that was a Netflix one where that's the one where he's chained to the bed, right? And then
Yeah.
so did you read the book?
No.
Okay, in the book, and this is right at the end when she's chained to the bed and she's thinking about everything the whole time. And in the book, I think there's something she hears on the radio or something or TV about some guy that escaped the loony bin or some shit like that. And later on, she wakes up in the middle of the night and sees like a shadow in the corner of the room, which was kind of creepy. That was like the best part of the whole damn book.
Huh.
I think they put that into the movie, if I'm correct, but I think they did it later on, and it was kind of like a side note, which that was kind of the part I was waiting to see, but I can't remember. Maybe you do.
I don't. And again, it was my least favorite movie of his. So yeah, I would not read the book after watching that. That's how crappy it was to me.
And the book was slow because all it did was it was her covering her life, and he had a few like that. Like I remember I got Dolores Claiborne for my birthday one year, and I remember starting it.
Isn't that perfume stuff they used to have?
Yeah, I just remember putting that down. I don't think I ever read it. And there was a lot of books like that. The Girl That Loved Tom Gordon, and I read that. Being a Stephen King fan, I was also a Royals. I still am a huge Royals fan, and Flash Gordon was our relief pitcher for a few years back in the early '90s, and he wrote a book because I think he got traded to the Red Sox. King's a big Red Sox fan. And he wrote a book about that, which was just a short, like 150, but it was kind of one of those that just same thing. A girl lost in the woods, thinking back,
No.
So there's definitely some swings and misses. Some people probably like them. They weren't my,
cup of tea.
Yeah, they definitely weren't.
Now, do you a little bit of trivia? And I'm pretty sure you already know this, but I'm gonna throw it at you anyway.
Go ahead.
He had a couple books that he wrote under a pseudonym, a pen name.
Richard Bachman.
Bingo! I knew you'd fucking know what it was.
Yeah, I believe it was the Thin Man, right?
Thinner.
Or Running Man.
Running Man and Thinner.
Yeah, the Long Walk. Desperation. And then that was a twofer. I bought those in a bookstore in the early 90s.
Desperation is what we should rename this podcast to.
You sound that bad. Yeah, there was some. yeah, there was he wrote a couple. What was it? There was a popular one. I thought that Bachman had written.
Well, Running Man was pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
They made the first running with Arnold
Yeah, Thinner.
Schwarzenegger.
Thinner's the one I'm thinking of, right?
Oh
Thinner.
yeah, Thinner was a
Yeah,
good
Thinner.
one.
That was
Yeah,
Bachman.
yeah,
Um,
that's correct. Yeah,
that's a great movie too, though, right? That you know what? That qualifies as King. Yeah. Have
yeah.
you ever read The Long Walk at all?
No,
That's a good movie. It's almost like those Hunger Game things where it starts out that they would make these young kids walk, and then they'd have to keep walking. No excuses, you just have to keep walking. And then as they started to fall from lack of nourishment, lack of water, they'd kill them or shoot them. So
dude,
it's kind of that you just have to keep walking. Yeah,
that sounds like all my adult life, man.
just walking.
With the Marine Corps, it's like
Right.
you put your shit on. We used to have to do before deployments. It was a pre-deployment workup called the Marine Corps Combat Readiness Evaluation Test, and one of the last evolution out of the whole evaluation was a 26-mile force march, full gear, in 8 hours or less. That's not fun.
Mm-mm.
There's nothing fucking fun about that shit.
Right.
Anyway, I just had flashbacks when you talked about kids walking. It's just it's my Agent Orange acting up.
That's good trivia. I like that one. What was your you said the favorite book? What that was refresh my memory.
Needful Things.
Needful Things. Now, did you like the movie? Was that
The movie was okay.
mm-hmm.
Again, and I think most people would agree that when I read a book, when people read books, it's so much better than any movie could ever make it, because you're using your creative imagination to picture things how you think it should be in the book. But
and that's another thing, man. You know what? I'm gonna name another one I loved, and it actually, man, there's this. It's probably his best book, and it's called On Writing. And for the longest time, I wanted to be a writer, and he wrote a book about how to do it. But it was touching. He had some good examples of stuff, and then he had some stories from when he was a kid, and then he kind of tells you how to do it. He ends up.
Wait a minute. You said touching and stories when he was a kid. I don't know if I like where this is going, pal.
Hey, this isn't freaking. This isn't freaking
Chris
Hansen Island here.
Or Chris Hansen.
Jesus, here we go. Where was I? You're killing me.
He was in the kitchen with Chris Hansen, about ready to get taken to jail.
No, I wasn't. No, but it was a great story. He actually did an example story, which was he put together some numbers, and then at the end, he wrote like just a sub kind of story to show you how it's done, and it ended up being the movie 1308, the book 1308.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, he turned that into that. That was the example book or beginning, and he liked it so much that he just finished it. He goes, I just finished it. But that was a great, obviously it was never turned into a movie and never will be, but it was a great book. And you kind of get to know him a little bit and, see that side that, back then, nobody really, they all thought he was a lunatic,
Right. Some still think he is, just saying.
Yeah, that's on another note, though, right? He's just a lunatic in another way.
So, my favorite movie is The Green Mile.
Oh yeah, dude, that's a great one. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Did you read the books?
I didn't read the books.
Okay, so what he did with that one is he did what was, back in the old days they would do. It was called installment books, and they would release every month, like 100-page book, but it was of a full story, but you would get it like in chapters. And he did that. So I would go out every month and buy these tiny little page. They weren't hardbacks; they were just little paperback books, about 100 pages each, and you would read it. Later on, of course, you released it in full, but that was really neat because each month you could pick it up. And I think there's probably 5. I can't remember now, but that was great. And the book was almost, I want to say it's been years, but I want to say it's almost identical to the movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the movie, man. And so that's kind of why I didn't go back and read the book, because I didn't want it to be ruined for me. That's how much I like the movie.
Hmm.
But you know what's funny is sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times, I get when I'm thinking about scenes from the movie, I will mix up scenes from that movie and Shawshank Redemption in my mind
Oh
for
God
whatever
damn,
reason.
you're killing me. And I never read that. It's a short story. It's out of I can't remember what it is, but it's the book with apt pupil, I believe. It's called the Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption. I think it's only 150 pages. I actually never read it, but the movie, dude. My son is getting in high school. They had me sign a permission slip for him to. Can he watch that movie? And I told him, dude, over and over. Probably so much so that he doesn't want to see the movie now. But I said, dude, I go, you're gonna freaking love that movie, dude. It is so good. And I actually had a girlfriend. I was probably 23 at the time, and she was at work one night. She called me up, said, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm just looking to rent a movie. Maybe some pay per view or whatever." And she goes, "Get that Shawshank Redemption." I go, "Is it good?" And she goes, "Oh, you're gonna love it." So she must have known, like the kind of movies I like. Of course, I think everybody likes that movie.
Oh, it's
So
so
I
good,
rented that,
man.
dude, and I remember sitting there just going, "Fuck, what an like, wow,
Yeah,
like I can't believe I'd seen this so late. Like it was it's an unbelievable movie, and again,
it's
an
amazing.
unbelievable story by the character
An
development
unbelievable
in it.
writer.
What's that?
An unbelievable writer.
An unbelievable, right? I couldn't believe it.
It's kind of like this podcast. It's unbelievable that we're still doing it. Oh,
Jesus, dude, you're killing me.
I'm on a roll tonight, man. The problem is I had to keep all my comments in on the previous
On the
podcast that I
last one,
produced.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah. You were just
I
kind of sitting in
gotta
the background.
I gotta get them out, man. They're just
Yeah.
yeah.
I get it.
Too bad I'm
Why not
shitting
do it
on
at my
ours.
expense and Stephen King's expense?
Oh, well, it's our expense,
At our
man.
expense. Our expense.
I'm
You're
shitting
being
all over
self
myself.
deprecating in a really nasty way.
That's what I do.
Um, that's a good one, dude. Yeah. Now, what did you think of the movie? Like
Which one?
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah.
It's a classic, man. It is truly timeless. It doesn't matter, when you watch that thing. You can watch it 20 years in the future from now, and it will still be an amazing, amazing movie. Not only the acting, but just the writing, the story, man. The story's incredible.
Yeah. 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 Again, and then Andy Dufresne and when I signed that paper, I remember thinking, I think that show, my kid's like not 16 now, but I remember going, I wonder how bad that is. And I thought about the blowjob part. Now I'm gonna put something in your mouth, and you gonna take what I give you. Two things never happened again. They never put it. What did he say? They never put anything in Andy Dufresne's mouth. Remember that Morgan Freeman? And the narration was perfect, which
Right.
that's what Morgan Freeman
Well,
does is
yeah.
he narrates.
He's the king. Him and
He's the
James
king.
Earl Jones, man.
Yeah. That's
Morgan
a good one.
Freeman.
Yeah. I wish I would have. I can't believe I haven't ever just read that. But I've read. I got burned a few times reading those short stories, and one was Graveyard Shift. You remember that one?
Yes, and Ryan learned never to bring a nasty whore back to his hotel room again. The burning from the book.
No, that was the Graveyard Shift was a short story book I read, and I went and seen it with a nasty horror.
Oh,
And
my
that
bad.
fucking movie is terrible, dude. Every now and again, I haven't seen that since high school, and every now and again that'll pop up, and I think, man, maybe it's better. Maybe I missed something.
I
I
don't
still haven't
think
clicked on it, and
I
I'm not
don't think
gonna.
I've ever watched it all the way through.
They're just so bad. It's like
Yeah,
about rats or some shit like that.
yeah.
That's one of those misses. But see, dude, that's like they would make anything he did into a movie. They don't give a shit.
It's the name. They know it's going to draw big
Yeah.
bucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's why their dumbasses are striking now, because there's no more original content in Hollywood. Oh, did I go there? I did. Anyway,
You did.
I did.
So, um,
I have some honorable mentions.
okay.
I really, really liked the book Dreamcatcher.
Yeah, that was a good one too. And the show was quite a bit like it, right?
Yeah, it really stuck. It really stuck close to
Yeah,
the book. The other one that I really really liked was Doctor Sleep, because that is
that's
definite.
Torrance, the son.
Yeah, it's a
Hmm.
spinoff of The Shining.
Right. They did the movie really good. Really, almost. Did you read the book?
I did, yeah,
Yeah, they read it. They did it really close to.
yeah. It was pretty damn
Yeah,
close.
that's a good one. Yeah, you get a lot of good ones. Yeah. So I mean, what do you think his influence was like on? Because back then, we were just starting to kind of come into the horror genre, right? The slasher. There was Black Christmas, or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, um, Halloween. What do you think? Like he came along, kind of made it mainstream a little bit because when I love horror movies and you either loved them or hated them back then. It was
Right,
one of those things. You had your little group. Not everybody loved them, and if you loved them, people thought you were weird, and they weren't. It was just the people that made them seemed to love them, and the people that watched them seemed to love them, and the people that vice versa. They hated them, or they didn't even
right.
pay attention to them,
I
and they
think
didn't get much credit. But I think he kind of comes along, right? Wouldn't you say? And
I think he made it mainstream simply
yeah,
because there were all the slasher movies. That was horror at that time. That
hmm,
was the genre, was the slasher flicks. He comes along and he tells a story that you can't help but to just be a part of and get sucked right into it. There's no more titties flopping around and college kids in the woods. Just waiting for Freddy or somebody, whatever the case may be, to come out. There's basically no plot to that, but he brought you into a whole new world, and his horror was, a lot of it was insidious, right? It took almost a whole book to kind of creep up on you and then scare the crap out of you at the end for a lot of it. It just kind of strung you along.
hmm,
So that was brand new to that genre. So I think that's why a lot of people, they really got on board and they could really appreciate it because they were getting the best of both worlds. They're getting a great story and they're getting the shit scared out of them.
yeah, yeah. Good points. I think the one thing I would say his influence, like I said, I'll take it back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I didn't see till a couple years later. I remember seeing the commercials on TV, but I remember the controversy behind it. And then Halloween '78. Then you start getting the Friday the 13th, which I started seeing on HBO. But those were movies that I would watch. Like as a kid, I'm like, I can't wait to see Halloween. I want to see Friday the 13th. I think what King did was he made it acceptable with Carrie, The Shining, Christine, and movies like that for even my parents to watch, which they weren't going to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they weren't
Right.
going to watch. They probably did watch Halloween, but it wasn't probably because it was more talked about than anything, and not something that they wanted to watch. Where I think he kind of incorporated the story that what he did was we all have been there, like with Carrie or The Shining. We all kind of
Mhm.
lost our freaking minds, and some of us had drinking. They were more relatable, I think, to adults, and I think that brought it into the mainstream world a little bit more. And then when people were coming down on him about this horror, I think a lot of the times it was probably because they related to it a little bit more, and they're like, "Oh God,
Yeah,
I
right.
don't want to think like that."
I think the other one of the other factors that made him so popular and so accepted by mainstream was the fact that the stories that he told leading up to and excluding the paranormal aspect of it could have been great stories in their own right, and they're very relatable. But then he throws in that twist, man. That little paranormal twist with whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And that really gets you hooked because the story is so believable up to that point. Then it makes you start thinking, well, shit, that's so real. Maybe this really could have happened, or maybe it did happen. The mind can wander. So I think
Hmm.
that's what made him really a powerhouse back then, coming in and then taking over that genre at the time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Another one I just thought of was The Mist. right? Which
Oh
I'll probably
yeah.
hit up this Halloween. I listened to the audiobook. I found a really good audiobook version on it one year,
Hmm.
and it ended quite a bit differently.
Mhm.
I want to ruin it in case anybody listens to it, but
Yeah.
it
Don't.
was
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
had more of a Frank Darabont, who did Shawshank Redemption, did the Mist. So you can kind of see they're done well. I think his budget was a little bit lower, so there was a few things that were a little bit uh, not tidied up,
Mm.
like the serpent coming through the garage door, but you can see Darabont's footprints all over it, and he had that. Do you remember that ending
No, I
of
don't.
the Mist? Okay, you should check that out, and it's just a depressing,
Is that the
almost.
one where they're in the grocery store?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But the ending was just it's just dark,
Did they all
and
die?
yeah. Well, the dad has to kill. He didn't have to, but he did. And then the army brigade comes along, and they're like, "Oh shit, we could have all been saved, but it's too late because he killed his own son." But
Oh, I
the
remember it now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
short
Yeah.
story version was had a lot happier ending. But anybody who listens to this should listen to that short story version because it's fun. Because everything that happens, they're just driving in their car. They hear on the radio. They're kind of told where to go. It kind of plays out just like that movie,
Mhm.
but the ending, they just they're searching for savior or salvation, and
Speaking of happy endings, I got nothing.
here we go. So, what do you think of him as an author? Is he great?
Yeah, for
Is
sure.
he?
I think so.
Yeah.
Uh, Being completely objective, taking all other aspects out. Being a writer myself, 100%. He's
Hmm.
great. He is great. He's a master. Like I said earlier, he's so masterful at the craft of telling a story that there is a book for every single person out there that he has written. You know what? You may not like all of it, but if you are into different things, I guarantee you he's got a book for you. May not be all of them.
Yeah. Well, there's times when I question this myself or wonder it. Do you think he's overrated at all? I mean, every book that he releases, it like Holly, number one. I mean, it seems like 2 weeks before it's even released, it's at number one. It's going to go at number one, and I assume that's because they print so many copies, expecting so many purchases, right, or pre-orders or whatever.
Right.
Do you think he's a bit overrated?
Um,
I mean, there are other authors out there. You have Bentley Little, who kind of writes along the same. I don't
I
think a lot of people
don't
even know who he is.
I don't think he is. And the
No.
reason I say that because they're like, well, you just mentioned it right there. There's other authors out there that they copy his style, not plagiarize or try to steal, but they're heavily influenced by the way he writes. And if he was overrated, in my opinion, there wouldn't be people out there trying to copy that style.
Hmm.
The way he writes, the way he develops characters, the way he basically you don't really have to use your imagination because he paints the picture so perfectly in his writing. So from that perspective, as a writer and as a fan of reading, yeah, I don't think he's overrated. I think he has set the bar pretty freaking high, actually.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think
Now I see
there's a
how.
being a reader, there's a lot of authors I've come across that I think do a pretty good job in terms of horror. There's a lot of guys that have written a lot of short stories. Some of the most memorable short stories just came from anthologies that I've read. That
Mhm.
they've had some pretty good stuff too. Um,
So
but I
you
think
know
with
what?
him, it comes back to the endings for me. Sometimes it just seems like what the shit. Like
So
this ending.
so I'll play devil's advocate for a moment. I could I could totally see how someone would say he's overrated. I think, particularly with the ending issue, if you're not a fan of that kind of ending, I can definitely see where you would say, yeah, this dude's overrated. But if you're a fan of that kind, then I could see how you're like, yeah, he's not overrated. He's where he needs to be. In fact, he's probably not where he should be. I don't subscribe to that theory, but I'm just playing devil's advocate, like I said. But yeah, I can definitely see how people would think that he's overrated, especially with some of his, and I think this is what you were kind of wanting to do, segue into some of his later stuff where it seems like he's kind of losing his marbles a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a long journey for Steven, I think. It's interesting. It's really an interesting case study if you want to look at it like that. It seems, I think a lot of things changed with him and his writing. He had that. I think he was hit by that. He was out walking one day. I don't know if you remember that, but he was hit by the car. The guy swerved off the side of the road and hit him.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
man.
I noticed and rightfully so. He was angry about that. I can't remember. I don't think the guy was drunk, but I just don't think he was paying attention. And he was just out for a walk and just about killed him. I remember at the time I was angry myself because I didn't think we were going to get the Gunslinger Dark Tower novels finished. And I think at that point you kind of start to notice a little bit of difference in him. I don't know if maybe he got his life, just his perspective on life changed. I think that the
So
yeah.
they're beta males and they're alpha males out there, as you well know. Your alpha males can take a life-threatening experience, fucking eat it, digest it, and move on. Your beta males, it fucks with them. It fucks with them in their head, and they're never the fucking same.
Yeah.
I've seen it, dude. I've seen it a lot. And I'm thinking he's a beta male because you're right. He changed after that accident.
Yeah, I think that's like what you're referring to is, there's so many, I think, even going and thinking about what I seen with COVID, you're going to die,
Yep.
and tomorrow's promised to no one. And one of the things I noticed so much was I just don't think that a lot of people either believe in anything, not that I'm a great believer, but I'm not I'm not afraid to see what's out there. And I know it's going to be over with before you even know it. But a lot of people, I think, had a hard time adjusting to that. I want to live, I see it with my mom, honestly. She's older and she just doesn't ever want to die. And that's great. I mean, she keeps herself but she's afraid, I think, more than anything. And I think get right with and accept it. It's going to happen. And then you're going to be able to, quit worrying about it. So I think so many people think, well, I haven't done everything I wanted to do. Well, you're never going to have enough time.
Nope. I've had several brushes with death, quite literally.
Right.
Yeah, and you can sit there and you can freaking piss and moan about it and turn into a little shrill, or you can. I'm just gonna live my life, man. Because I realize time is short and precious, and you don't get to pick when you go.
Right.
So
yeah.
Enjoy it while you got it.
You're gonna die, and I so I think his writing kind of changes then, and then we'll get to the big one is, and this is we were talking about his book earlier, Holly, that just came out. So I was looking into it. I got his last one. I think it was I got it on Audible. I can't remember what the hell it was. It was like freaking 20 hours long. So I thought, this is someone's going to read this to me. I'm going to pay someone to read this to me. But
That's right.
That's my way of feeling rich, right? It's like rich people get to say, "Bring me some tea at noon." I get to say, "Read this fucking book to me." That's how I do it, right? I'm going to pay you $20. You read this book to me.
Come hither and read to me.
It's kind of a great deal if you think about it. Someone read a book to me. Like somebody I don't know just read a book to me. But anyhow, so I got that, and it was a pretty decent book. The thing I started noticing um, was the TDS, right? You know what that is,
Oh, do
right?
I?
The
That's
Trump
the
derangement
trash
syndrome,
disposal system, right?
right? Trust disposal, yeah, kind of in a way.
Actually,
Yeah,
we have.
it was the Trump derangement syndrome, and I started noticing that, and I can't remember what. Well, but it was for sure after 2016. And I think that we've all seen that, whether
Mhm.
you are a fan of Trump or whether you despise Trump. I think we've
Listen,
all
who would
seen
despise
those.
me?
Huh?
Who would despise me? You are clearly not in your right mind if you despise me. I'm wonderful. I'm great. I'm amazing. Ask anyone; they'll tell you.
That's good. That's
Thank
good.
you.
And I think we've seen it in every. Not everybody. There's those people that let that bother them, and there's those people that let that not bother them, and there's those people that just get busted. And dude, I started picking up on it probably about four novels back, and I'm just guessing, but I started to hear that the name was brought up, which I can't recall. Trump was different in so many ways. He just brought a side out of people that I just don't think you would have seen. And
Right.
you, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint. Like, well, did he talk about presidents? I'm sure he did. He wrote 11/22/63, which was a great book too, right? About the assassination of Kennedy. And, you know, Kennedy, he was obviously referenced. He's referenced other presidents in the the
Mhm.
Dead Zone was one. That was a great movie. And, that's not referencing presidents, but he's talking about presidents. And there's always kind of been to a degree, a political side or political writing. But I started noticing it more, like, obviously, like I said, since 2016. And then there'd be like Trump, at least a couple. I think I'd count like a couple times in like the last four books for sure. And then Trump, Trump, Trump. And then you get it like three times. And so, from my understanding, um, I did not pre-order this book on Audible, and I thought about it because I've always been like that loyal listener.
Mhm.
I've
Have you
He's a
always been
good
the first
writer. He
caller?
keeps What's that?
Have you always been the first caller?
First caller,
That's right. Call now. Caller number one.
Wolfman Jack, dude. No, I just was that King calls them constant readers, man. Like they're the people that have always been. So since I was a kid, or for sure 16, 17 years old, I considered myself a constant reader. Um, and this one, I kind of started to worry because I read the summary of it, and I was like, "Ooh," it was about COVID. And I'm like thinking, well, I don't want to rehash that. I don't want to get back into that.
Right.
I read books generally to get away from that, right? I think most of us do,
Right. The
or
escapism.
escapism, right? For sure. And I kind of was like, you know what? I think I'm going to hold out on this one because I've noticed this pattern of, no matter what, I could care less if you like Trump. I could care less if you love Trump. It doesn't matter to me either way.
Mhm.
It's Everyone's entitled to their thoughts and their opinions, and I'm glad that they can have them. But not everybody's like that, and I think he's one of those people, right? So I started reading reviews on it, and I was thinking, well, should I order this? And I started going through the reviews, and I've got some of them here. I'm going to read some of them because they're fucking hysterical, dude. So this is on Audible app, and I noticed the first thing I noticed that when King writes a book, normally you'll get, they have it rated by 5 stars, and it's almost for sure he's getting four, almost for sure.
Right.
4.5, maybe five. His storytelling's so good generally that he's going to get that, even if he says he hates America, he's still going to get it.
Right.
Um, here's some of the reviews that I copied these because I was like, I got to read this shit. Like this is too much. Um, this guy. So I started out on a good side. This guy says once again, right? So I'm going to give you the good side. He gives it 5 stars. He says once again, Stephen King delivers. Warning, you won't be able to put this book down until you read it from cover to cover. In classic King style, he brings back a familiar character and expands the scope of the character. It's a fantastic read. So I wanted to start it off with that, be a little positive before we start
Oh
rolling into
boy.
why it gets 3 stars, right?
Oh
And you got to
boy.
think too, he's probably paying because I read a couple of these reviews where the guy says, I don't know why I gave it 1 star. I would have given it 0, but for some reason Amazon keeps changing my stars to 5. So Amazon was going back in and changes the, according to this guy, but he kept going back in and changing it back. Uh, this guy, he gives it
Shocking.
2 out of 5 stars, and he says, obsessed with Trump. King is obsessed with Trump and vaccines. It's concerning. Just write a book. This ruins the story. Damn, what happened? Next
Wow.
guy says, he gives it 1 out of 5 stars. He says, exactly what you'd think it is. And this is my favorite. This is by Brad. And he says, he's got in quotations 10 out of 10. Good boy, Rachel Maddow. And then he gives his review. Then he puts his in quotations. He says, I'm done. I mean it this time. Me.
Wow.
Which is how I kind of feel after reading this, right? This guy gives it 1 out of 5 stars. He says, King hates Trump. King hates COVID. He goes, this is your storyline. King hates Trump. King hates anti-vaxxers. Oh, yeah. And then there's Holly, return to sender.
Wow.
Another 1 out of 5 stars. A new drinking game. Just use COVID. Trump or masks. 4 chapters in. Not sure I'll finish. I have listened to every other King novel up to this point. I may be done with him as an author unless he can get his head on straight and remember what we pay him for. I guess that us low peasants can't even get our entertainment without betters preaching to us on how to live our lives.
God,
I
isn't
give the
that the
first 4
truth?
chapters 1 star. Not sure why Audible keeps changing my score to 5 stars.
That dude's spot on, man. Whoever wrote that is
This guy just keeps going back in, apparently. The
wow.
next guy gives it a 1 out of 5 stars. He says, so done with the political junk. Couldn't make it past the first 20 minutes. COVID, Trump bad, masks good. Anyone who disagrees is stupid. Next guy, 1 out of 5. Political vitriol. Terrible, horrible. Couldn't get past his political biases, hatred, and attempts at furthering division, turmoil, and chaos. 2 out of 5
Wow, man.
stars. CDC advertisement. High school plot with heavy vaccine endorsements and a bumper sticker that says Stephen King hates Trump.
Damn.
And then I'll follow it up just to be fair because there were some positives. So it's pretty much split. But the negatives were hilarious. The positives not so much. It seemed like it was coming from maybe somewhere else. But this guy gives it a 5 out of 5. He says loved it. The character Holly is one of my favorites. The story was engaging all the way through. I found the COVID thread that is woven throughout it to be distracting, though. so
Wow.
so even so even 5 out of 5 stars. Even she's kind of in agreement. This is Michelle that there's something a little bit off. So
So would it
yeah,
be safe to say that if you're a liberal, you would love it? If you're a conservative, you would hate it?
yeah. Now keep in mind, I went through the majority of the reviews, and I kept checking in and updating day after day because they were funny, and there were a lot of people that said, "Hey, man, if you," and I kind of tried to stay away from those a bit because, you're going to get 2-sided people, but there were a lot that were kind of like me. They were like, "Look, man, I love you, dude, but you get your head on." From my understanding, all the reviews taken in, it was kind of a thing of he kind of hijacked her storyline, like this great character, by the way, and it's read by. Have you watched Secession
No.
at all? Okay, so the actress who plays Holly in Mr. Mercedes, she does it great. Like if you read the books, she's just like her, just exactly how you would imagine her.
Huh.
And I guess she reads this book. So again, not having heard it, I would think that she'd do great. A lot of people that were in disagreement with that. They liked Will Patton, who had read the first couple ones, and he did the Outsider. That was that short. Did you see that little movie on or series on HBO?
No.
Okay, so he did that, and people liked him, but I can't see her being bad.
Dude, I don't watch shit.
No, good thing we covered Stephen King then.
Well, I do like to read, but I don't watch anything like modern, if you will. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I'm just not watching TV. Um, yeah, I ain't got time for that.
Well, so I can't see her being bad, but a lot of people had complaints about that. But all in all, um, my as a constant reader, as a guy who's, I'll just say this: I'm not a starstruck guy. And I had somebody ask me one time. They said, have you ever asked anybody for an autograph? And I said, nah, man. I just, it's not my thing. Not a
Mm-hmm.
big autograph guy. I could really care less. They take their pants off and put them on the same way we do. So it really was never a big thing for me. They said, well, if you had to ask, who would you ask? And it was Stephen King, man. I remember I read, and I seemed to think that I knew him. I seemed to think that um,
Could relate.
I could relate, and he could relate,
Right.
which is sad because um, I can't say that I would feel that way anymore from like just the experiences I've had in his books, and then of course like these reviews. I think they're dead on when they say, at least like from what I said, from what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a Twitter guy, but I've seen some of the Twitter feeds, and he seemed awful obsessed. I guess I don't get that sometimes when
I don't get it at all.
Michael Jordan said it best: Republicans buy shoes too. You're isolating 50% of your fan base, and for what? I mean,
Right.
you're being kind of fed a bunch of shit, really. You don't know. You don't. We want to think that you don't hate half the country. And from what I could read in the reviews, it sounds like he's, if you didn't get a vaccine, he hates you. If you're a
Yeah.
Republican, he hates you. If you liked Trump, he hates you. And I don't get it. I know. I
Me
don't think I
neither.
ever will. I think that
Nope.
it honestly is. I think he busted some people. I think he busted them bad. And um, some people can just say, "Hey, he's not the president anymore. Let's move forward." And I just don't. I think he. I'll tell you this. After I read the reviews, I looked at my wife and because I was reading them out loud to her, and I said, "I go, fuck, man. I go, this makes me not want to ever get old." And I
Too
just
late.
don't want to be like, I mean, Jesus, if this what's it, because to me, he was always a pretty reasonable person. He's obviously an intelligent person. He obviously has, you can write those books if you're not smart, if you're not, he always seemed to me like a
Right.
down to earth kind of guy. And I thought, fuck, I don't want to get old if this is what happens.
Right.
Like if you start, you're yelling at clouds and shit like that, it's just,
I think from a psychological perspective, it's fucking fascinating, man. How one man can make so many people just lose their absolute fucking minds. And we're talking from the higher ups down to nobodies. One fucking dude is doing this. So I think Trump would be an amazing case study.
well, the, yeah, that goes without.
Man, we're not even talking. I mean, narcissism aside, that's the easy cherry picking. You know,
I don't even know if it was Trump, to be honest with you. I mean, certainly it is. Certainly he was the figurehead of a lot of
Mhm.
hate. For everyone has their reasons. Whatever.
It's
But
just
I
easy to
do think
focus on
this, man. And
him.
the first thing I noticed when he was running was that he went right after the media, and I looked and I said to my friends, and a lot of people hadn't even heard the phrase at the time, and I said, you never go to war with people that buy ink by the barrels. And he did. He went to war
Mhm.
with the media, fake news, this and that. And they, I had to write an essay in college about powerful forces. And I had, at that point, this was 10 years before, and I had said that the media was the most powerful force in the world. You go back and study the Vietnam War, and, when they were first allowed admittance or admitted into that war, they changed the way we forever looked at wars.
For sure.
They had it to the point where we looked at our own soldiers like shit,
And
and at that point I think we turn
get me started on
if
that.
we listen to what we hang on every word that they say. And I think that, and I'm not saying that he definitely was polarizing, he definitely said a lot of things and still says a lot of things that upset people. I don't think that he addressed COVID the way that he should have. A lot of people were really
No.
worried, and I'm sure King was one of them. But I think the media made a lot of shit up. He went to war with them. I, I think he opened a lot of eyes on one side, and I think you know, he
Shut a
turned
bunch on the
away. Like
other.
he just made the media at every angle just pound it home, pound it home. And I think some people fell for it,
Hmm.
um, and quit thinking for themselves.
Oh yeah. You've got the crazy radicals on the right just like you do on the left. And I don't know which is worse, the right or the left. They're both fucking morons in my opinion. I'm not a big Trump fan. I but again, I'm a factual, objective individual, and I have to look at numbers and I have to look at facts and what he did while he was in office, and he did some good things. But as far as a personality goes, man, I wouldn't want to be around that dude at all. And
Right? Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
give you another example. I did not like Obama's politics at all. I didn't like what he stood for, his platforms, none of that crap. But I tell you what, I'd like to have a fucking beer with that dude because I think that with our last show, I think that you and I have proven that just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean that I have to consider you an enemy. I can still be your friend. I can still hang out with you. We can still talk about anything else. All right. Find a subject we don't agree on. All right. Let's agree to disagree. Move on to the next one. Instead of, hey, fuck you. I hate you. You're awful. It's the whole tribalism mentality that drives me
Yeah. I
up a
think
wall.
yeah, you're right. I mean, um, that's like we had some obviously different kind of feedback on that last one, and I think our take is the same. It's we just try to learn from everybody, and we like to hear other people's takes. Especially, I love to hear people's takes that think differently than me.
No
I
doubt.
wouldn't want to be around people that think just like me. That would be
Yeah.
worrisome, I think. But
I,
um,
I'm just fascinated. I want to know what makes them tick. Why do you not think the way I do? Or why don't I think the way you do? But let's be civil about it. You
yeah,
know?
well,
That's
everybody deserves. I think everybody deserves a degree of respect, and I think we've lost that.
for
Like,
sure.
you can't learn if you're shutting your mind off to, and that's the thing about King, right? Is like when I seen this, um, and I've experienced it by reading his books, and I didn't read this one, so I can't say what this one's like, but I can definitely say that I agree with these people. I can see it. I can totally see that,
Hmm.
and I think that it's hard to believe that somebody like that could let someone bother him that much. Now I'm sure he would go ahead and say that. Well, I was writing it as a product of the time. This book was written in 2020, which I actually read in a Rolling Stone interview, and that's exactly what he said. He prefaces this whole what you see with a lot of, and they always have to say conservatives. I don't think it has to be conservatives. It can
Hmm.
be anyone.
Hmm.
There's obviously I read some liberal reviews where they're like, fuck, I'm a liberal, but I just want to escape.
Right.
I don't want to think about politics. So you can't really fall back on that excuse. And he's smart enough to know better. What it is people that got busted, they want to vent. And they're using, they're hijacking whatever to do it. And it makes them so angry. And that's fine. But maybe go see a therapist. We're not your
I know
freaking.
what you mean by busted, but explain to everyone else what you mean.
I think he broke their fucking brains, dude. I mean, honest to God, I think that, and I don't think people can believe that, but I've actually met them and I've seen them. I think we all have. And I think we're so political today. I don't understand it. We definitely were like this fucking 20 years ago for sure.
Nope.
It's become like Joe Rogan says it best. It's football for nerds. Is what it is. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just really is. And so when I say busted, I mean they're brain busted. It's when I read these reviews and I hear about an author who can't seem to keep his politics. It's okay to be political, I guess, but write a fucking get on, run for president.
Right.
That's another thing. You always hear people got all these ideas and they hate certain people. Well, try it, man.
Yeah.
Everybody thought DeSantis was going to be outstanding, and then it's not looking like it. So you can see how
No.
hard it is. Uh, I'm not taking anybody's side, or whatever you do it then, but don't write it and don't hijack one of your characters to
So
put your propaganda out there.
I'll liken it to this. If you weren't, and I'm saying this to you as if you were Stephen King, if you weren't famous for writing your books, do you think anyone would give a shit about what your political thoughts are?
Yeah, you know what? And I'll answer that with this. One of the reviews I read and I left out, the guy said, "I wonder if during the Reagan era, Stephen King writes this if he's relevant today." And that's it in a nutshell, right? He established himself, and that's why he's using his soapbox. He's got a soapbox now, right? So
That's my whole
part of
point.
me thinks that, I sat there and I said, well, I think he'd be smarter than this. He's obviously an intelligent man. He wouldn't do this. But then I think there's the other side that's like, you know what? If I had,
But he's had plenty of opportunity to bash other Republican presidents.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think that part of it is, I have so much money, it doesn't matter at this point. Because I remember back after he got hit by that car accident, or hit by the car, he was going to quit writing. That
Right.
was fucking 23 years ago, and he didn't. So everything he's writing for now is probably great grandchildren. So he probably doesn't care. But there's also the side of him that's like, fuck it. I'm gonna stand on my soapbox. I have the power to do it.
See,
It's just like
th-
if you're Pearl Jam and you start you release your first album, you want it to be the best thing ever, and then 5 years go along and you've accomplished a lot. You've accrued this mass fame. You can start to fuck around.
yeah,
You
I was
know,
I was going to say I'll disagree with you with one point in the fact that I don't think he's
I don't
writing
like it
for
when
his.
people disagree with me.
I know that's why I'm doing it. I think he's not writing for his grandchildren. He's writing for himself now
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he
no,
can.
no, and don't misunderstand me. I agree with you 100%. I'm just saying what you're saying is that's him coming out. That's
Right.
him. It's him on a soapbox. It's him yelling through the fucking bull. America, listen to me. And then he's angry. You wouldn't be insulting 50%. This is the whole deplorable thing, right?
Right.
Um, but I think more than anything is I don't think you need to be a tool. We're already divided, and I'll say this as an all time, majority of my life, a lover of Stephen King. I can see the division. Those that don't think it exists,
That
look at
sounded
this. Look
gay.
at this guy. This guy is split. He's gone. And when you start to write like that, it's all about politics. It's all about COVID. It's all about Trump. You are an example of exactly how divided we are. And you know, you come to expect more. And I think that's the heartbreak. To me, it's really sad, dude. It really is because, like I said, this was a guy that I probably would have, the only guy I probably would have approached for an autograph.
Hmm.
Um, and you feel like you lose. It's almost like losing a loved one in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've read a lot of reviews. A lot of people are saying I'd still buy his books. I don't know if I would. If you're going to put your opinions, your
Yeah.
subjective opinions before your quality of work. And
That's not why I bought your books in the past, and that's not
mm-mm.
why I won't buy them. I mean, that's exactly why I won't buy them in the future because I turn to you, Mr. King, for escape. I enjoy your stories. I really don't give a fuck about what you think politically. Stick to the fucking stories, man. That's why you're getting paid, and that's what you're good at.
Yeah, 100. And that's again, we did a whole podcast on talking about, and you brought up some. I can't even believe, if you go through them, I'm sure we're missing some. And
Oh, I'm sure we're
there's going to
missing
be
a
people
ton.
listening and go, Jesus, they forgot, and we're sorry. He's done so many good things, so many good stories, um, that you forget almost, and that's what's so sad is that it's almost, I wouldn't say tarnished. Um,
Give me your
I had a
final
buddy,
thoughts.
I had a friend in high school. His dad got a brain tumor. towards the end of right before graduation. And I had run into him afterwards, and I said, "Hey, man, how'd that work out with your dad?" And he goes, "Fuck, he's fucking finally dead." And I said, "Oh shit!" And he goes, "Nah, man, and I don't mean that to come out the wrong way. I love the guy to death." He said, "But at the end, he wasn't the same person anymore."
I
He
know
said,
exactly what he's talking about.
he just was calling me names, like yelling at me all the time. I didn't even know the guy, and it wasn't his fault, but I just was like, "Fuck, let this end."
Yeah.
And that to me is almost like Stephen King. It's like, dude, you had your run, man. I remember when my dad died, he was like a shell of himself. He was old. He was always like a 225 pound, 6'2" guy. And then when I seen him in his last few days, he was, wilting away in his hospital bed at like 185. And that's, it's like, holy
It's
shit.
horrible,
This was
man.
a guy that I didn't think anything could kill him. And here he is. And I think that we see that. And sometimes the people that we look up to, sometimes the heroes and the people that have affected,
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's the hero syndrome of placing somebody upon a pedestal and then finding out they weren't who you thought they really were. Give me your
I
final
don't even know if
thoughts.
it's that. I don't know if see that's the busted thing, right? Like the TDS. It's like would maybe that was in there the whole time and it just took the right person to expose it, or maybe you know
Maybe that car accident did more than anyone knows.
you could go back to the car accident, right? I'm
I
sure it wasn't
mean,
fun waking up in a ditch.
right. Give me your final thoughts on Stephen King in a minute or less.
Minute or less, shit, man. I think right now 75% of me, right? It's like I can still hold those memories. I can still remember the good times. It's just like this podcast, dude. It's like they weren't all good. All those years weren't great.
Right.
There was a lot of tough years there. There was a lot of homework. There was a lot of this and that. But we always seem to fall back on the good stuff, right? We always seem to fall back on the great things. We hang on to that. And, when we watch the old movies we watch and listen to the old music that we love, we think about the time that, like for me, my dad was still alive and he was in the other room and I was listening to that. And that's kind of Stephen King for me. That's the way it is. I'll always kind of go back and look at that and go, yeah, I remember that guy and I remember the good times and I'll forget the bad times. And that's the way this is for me. I just think that, I think that's sometimes why you want to see your heroes, whether it be a quarterback or baseball player or, like Michael Jordan or somebody like that, just retire and just
Yeah.
say, I'm walking away. So you
Yeah,
remember me
totally.
at this. And
So
sometimes I think it happens to even writers, apparently, where you should
you,
have just walked away.
you don't want to see that legend tarnished. Let me let me give you my final thoughts and then we'll wrap it up and get the hell out of here. Oh God, where do I even begin? Mr. King, I know you're watching this because we're so popular, and I know you'll hear this, so hear me out here. Stick to writing your stories because, I was a moderate fan up until this point. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about politics and every goddamn thing I do that the last thing I want to do is hear about it when I'm reading a very good author's story. So I think you lost a lot of people on this one, buddy. You should probably go back to basics and fucking go back to Maine. Be a Mainer. Be a weird Mainer up there, yeah? And leave politics out of everything. Just fucking don't do it, man. Just don't. Smoke some weed. Have a good time. Relax.
Well, you see, he was like an alcoholic, and that's another one we forgot was Maximum Overdrive, right? Like
Yeah, I was thinking about that just a minute
yeah,
ago.
damn, I love that. I'm probably gonna watch that coming up. And those are, like I said, man, I can watch that and forget all of this shit, because that's the good times, right? That's the times we want to hang on to, and um,
Oh,
great soundtrack.
one last thing. Try getting some pussy too, because that might help you relax a little bit there,
You think that
Steven.
shit's still working? Well, how old is Stephen King now?
I don't know, man. I tell you what, from a purely physiological standpoint, that shit'll work up to the day he dies, if he's healthy enough.
Mm-hmm.
I know my shit will. Anyway, listen, it's been an hour and 20 minutes. We could go on for hours on this topic, I think, but we probably need to wrap it up and
let's get out of here.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much again for tuning in to another episode of Nostalgia.
Don't forget to subscribe and like, and then what are we going to do next, Andy? I think we're going to go with the last Action Heroes, right?
I like it a lot.
We're going to cover that. Let me see. I think I wrote down a slogan for us. Let me read it off if I can. Is that the next one, or are we going to do something else? Because I always switch it.
Let's do it. We've been putting it off for a while.
It's been a while. We actually wanted to record this a while back. We're going to save it. But did I send that to you? What? Missing.
No.
Is it because one of my favorite movies was Missing in Action as a kid. So it's called Missing in Action Heroes, and it's what happened to the masculine men of the past.
Oh, I fucking love it, man.
Right? John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. Look at the stuff he did, right? Pale Rider.
I'll tell you what, Pilgrim. I'll
Chuck
let
Norris.
you eat the peanuts out of my shit.
Charles Bronson. Sylvester Stallone, right?
All right, you need to stop because I'm getting wood in a non-homosexual way.
Burt Reynolds, and then we got a lot. But I think what that was is we had been discussing, because that's a lot of the stuff we want to talk about, right?
Say that title one more time.
Oh, shit, let me find it again.
Missing in Action Heroes? Is that what it was?
Yeah, God dang it. Sorry.
Man, I love that.
Missing in Action Heroes. I thought that'd be a good title for us, right?
I love it.
But let me see. I had an actual take on that.
Well, save it for the show. If you want to hear Ryan's take on it, well, I guess you'll just have to tune in next week. And
oh, man, is it bedtime?
It's bedtime, man. Come on. I'm I'm old. Dude, if I had hair, it'd be gray or blue. And, I've been eating at Denny's dinner at fucking 4 p.m. It's way past bedtime.
Denny's dinner?
Yeah, man. Don't you know? Oh, that's where all the blue hairs go. They go to Denny's for dinner at 4 p.m. Got that old fucking ball special.
Damn. Denny's, man. Do we have Denny's by us?
Yeah, there's one off of Lake St. Louis Boulevard, actually.
Is that by the lake?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, damn, it pisses me up. Yeah, anyhow, so that's kind of it. We'll do that next time. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope we weren't too hard on Mr. King. I sure as hell wasn't trying to be.
I don't think we were. I think it was a very fair assessment.
Yeah, I think that whole woke shit too, right? Like everyone's so afraid. You know what? Real quick, I'll bring up another guy. I know you need to get off there, oldie. But it happened to, I think, Howard Stern and people like that. Those were the same pioneers that kind of paved the way. King of Horror, Stern of Shock, and they just seem to. I tell you what, I look at those guys and I'll say it again. I just do not want to get old. And what was that old Billy Joel song? Only the good die young.
That's right. That's right.
James Dean had it spot on.
Yeah, I guess I'm not fucking good because I'm old. Anyway, everybody, we're getting the hell out of here. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Peace.